play Genshin Impact, you understand the value behind all of the elemental reactions in the game. It's essentially what the entire game is based off of. Have one element, take another, put it together, and boom, you see something magical happen. In terms of picking favorite elements, Geo is unfortunately Genshin's least favorite child at this point. Our latest Geo character was Yunjin, all the way back in January 5th of 2022, aka version 2.4. That's a long time. It's insane that it's been that long since we've had a new Geo character. Not counting, Traveler, there are in total in Genshin 7 Geo characters. Look at the glorious 7 of Geo. Compare this number to our latest element, which only, started coming out in version 3.0, August of 2022, by the way. Dendro has 5 characters, excluding Traveler, with 2 more guaranteed on the way, Baizu and Kave. Both confirmed to be Dendro. That means Dendro has 7 characters in Genshin Impact, the same amount of an element that has been in the game since the beginning and releasing characters since the beginning of the game. It's rude to compare those two, isn't it though? Genshin views Dendro as its new baby. It wants to coddle it, it wants to praise it, it wants to give them everything. Okay, well let's take a look at the other elements inside of this game. Every other element in Genshin Impact has between 9 and 11 playable characters, excluding, Traveler. 9 to 11. It's obvious to see that Genshin does not prioritize Geo characters or the production of Geo characters. It's so disheartening to see an element that is a staple of the game not being valued, not being prioritized in terms of character creation. And in my opinion, I think the reason why Genshin Impact views Geo as its least favorite child is because of the reactions that Geo produces. Or well, reaction. Geo only has one reaction. That is Crystallize, aka pooping crystals. These little shards that you get from Geo characters reacting to certain elements give you a shield for that element. Okay, but what else? That's it. Shield for that element. It's very confining, very narrowing for, the entirety of Genshin. Other elements have wide arrays of things that they do, and Geo just has one. Poop and crystals that make shields. Did you know that not every Geo character has to make shields? Geo characters have the fantastic idea, the fantastic concept of making Geo constructs. So things you can climb to get better elevation, to do plunging attacks, things to block off people, a lot of terrain-based abilities. But the reactions do not reflect the terrain-based abilities that Geo has. And plus, there are more shielding characters than just Geo. Of course, we have Zhongli. He is the god of shields, But there are other characters that are not as good as Zhongli, but can be very beneficial in certain team comps, such as Layla, Thoma, and more characters to come. It's so limiting to have Geo, something that's built from the earth that you can mold the earth with, to just poop out a crystal and give you a shield. It's upsetting that that is the only reaction that Geo has. It feels so lackluster. Now, as you're listening to me, you might be thinking, hey, hold up. Animal only has one reaction too. Let's take a moment and compare the two, because I think you will agree with me that one of them is significantly better than the other. Let's talk about Swirl. Swirl is an anima-only reaction. It reacts with Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro. The damage based off of Swirl is based on your elemental mastery. It applies the nearby elements to other targets, and the target element is spread. Applied elements, like say if you had Pyro on them and then you triggered Swirl, the element carries over after the reaction. And now we have Crystallize. Reacts with Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro. Provides an elemental shield dependent on the element. Applied element does not carry over after reaction. Notice something with that. Swirl, while yes, the only reaction for Animo, does significantly more than just pooping out a crystal that's a shield. It helps in that matter because, typically when you're swirling an element, you're compiling them all together and making them have big damage numbers that go boom, 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 and you see the swirl just going constantly. Whereas Crystallize is just crystal. On top of that, Swirl makes thematic sense. I'm talking about how you would imagine the reaction to play out in real life. Swirl is the wind, picking up an element, spreading it far and wide, absorbing it into itself, creating a tornado, essentially, that it's picking up the elements and then swirling it around. The list of the current ones, makes sense because fire, wind, fire can be moved with wind. Electro, you can electrify a tornado. Hydro, rain in a tornado. And cryo, you can have hail in a tornado. It all makes sense and it connects together in a way that you can look at it and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Crystallize, thematic in the sense that it creates a crystal, because crystals are part of the earth, very earthy, something that is created with pressure. Okay, so it needs a reaction. But why? Why these elements? Why is it this way? Why does coming into contract with let's just say fire create a crystal? If you were to put a rock and fire together, do they make a crystal? No. Crystals are formed under immense pressure in the earth. If it was a geo on geo reaction, like say you applied geo to an enemy and then you reapply it, then it poops out a crystal, that would make sense because it's geo applying pressure on geo, thus making that little crystal. But any of the other elements that it's reacting with doesn't make sense. Why does Crystallize exist in this game at this point in time? What's the use of it when it makes, one, no sense thematically in how Genshin does reactions, and two, being very lackluster reaction. Every other elemental reaction in this game is very thematic. Not just Swirl, but imagine, take Hydro, water, pyro, fire, put them together, vaporize, steam. Steam's hot, it freaking hurts. Hydro and cryo, yeah. If you put something that's wet outside when it's really, really cold, it freezes. Makes sense. Dendro and pyro, grass, nature, fire, burning flames of plants, fire, destruction, spreads everywhere. It makes sense. You can sit somebody who is brand new to Genshin and teach them about the elemental reactions, and it sticks because it is intuitive to the themes of each of the elements and how that we perceive them to work. It's so incredibly frustrating to me seeing a game built on all of these unique combinations of elemental reactions giving Geo just crystals. Crystals that, in all honesty, I barely use. Do you use Geo characters? If you do, most of the time it's just a mono Geo team, isn't it? Ito is the DPS, Goro's the support, Zhongli is the shielder, and whoever else in the last slot. Maybe you'll spice it up and add another element. Ooh, spicy. It's so restrictive to play Geo in a game that's all about being interactive, creating these reactions. Please comment below if you play Geo characters, because I would like to know. The only one I use is Zhongli, and because he does shields. That's it. I never play Geo for the Crystallize reaction. I play Dendro for the fun reactions it gives. I have a cryo and a hydro team with an animo character that is just constantly freezing them and putting them in a little vacuum of freeze because that's fun to me. And Geo provides no fun. With the combination of Genshin's lack of love for Geo and the Geo element struggling in terms of elemental reactions, I believe it needs a revamp. Not only will this revamp give life to the current Geo characters that I assume majority of people don't play with except for Zhongli, it also gives future characters a brand new path to explore, to invigorate people, to, try new things, do more things that are uncommon in this game. It needs a revamp. Now, this is the part of the video where I get a little experimental. I get to share what I believe Geo should be in terms of reactions. I want people to fall in love with Geo because I think there is the potential there for something grand, for something magical, something unique to Geo. To explain these concepts, I want all of these elemental reactions to be based off of the ground. That's where Geo resonates, isn't it? Geo is the earth, the stone, the heart of the ground. So I want the reactions to center around that. Makes thematic sense. If Genshin is dedicated to having any Geo reaction make a shield, fine. You can tack it all to these reactions that I'm talking about in the future. I mean, what's it matter? Adding a shield on top of it. Who cares about game balance, right? It's not my job to balance the game. It's Hoyoverse's job to balance the game. I am just a simple VTuber who has opinions. Anyways, for the purpose of this video, I won't be mentioning shields unless it's specific to a certain reaction. Now, with all of that preamble out of the way, let's dive into some of these concepts. Huge thank you, by the way, to the folks in my Discord, especially Revier. Be inspired for these concepts and ranting about the Geo element with me, because poor Geo. Let's start with the first reaction. Geo with Hydro equals mud. It's a simple concept, isn't it? You see mud outside every day when it rains, or if you are in a place that has rain and dirt. You get the idea. Mud is the combination of water and dirt. Dirt can be associated with Geo. Put the two of them together, they make thematic sense. What this mud reaction would do is create an AoE underneath the triggered target, creating just mud, essentially debuffing attack speed and movement speed. You could say, I could go on about numbers and whatnot, but I'm not a numbers person. I'm a visual person who likes stories. So if you want to theory craft numbers for any of these reactions, please do. I would love to hear them. Do you think Hydro and Geo would do something else except make mud? You know, let me know. Because the two of them just make so much sense together in that way, because I see it happen in real life. I live in a state where it rains and we got some dirt. I see mud happen with the combination of these two. Geo and Hydro don't make a crystal. They make freaking mud. Next up on the plate, we have Geo and Dendro together make overgrowth. Now, before I get into what overgrowth does, think about it for a moment. Geo is the earth, the stone, the dirt, everything, we walk upon. Dendro is nature. Dendro is the plants, the flowers. Why isn't there a reaction for the two of them? They're literally reacting in real life. Look outside the window, people. If you see grass, there's a reaction there. That Genshin is not taking advantage of, that we see every single day, that would make Geo reactions so easy to understand. So, what overgrowth would do, in my concept, is it creates an AoE where it blocks the creation of shields and healing. So, for example, if you put a Kokomi little jellyfish there, it doesn't heal when it's in the overgrowth section. The reason behind that is it would just be fertilizer, wouldn't it? If you have tall, hungry blades of grass and plants, wouldn't healing and shielding just be fertilizer for them? Something to make them even stronger? So it would make sense it doesn't work. This wouldn't stop any healing or shields that are active by the time it starts. So for example, say if you're playing against an Abyss Herald and you trigger overgrowth right before they get to the new shield phase, they don't generate a shield. You could just kill them. Wouldn't that be something cool to see? Something that you can plan around to have it work for your enemies, and you try your best to stay out of the overgrowth because you don't want your shields to go away or well, not to come out, That'd be bad for you, but also bad for them. Next on the docket is Geo and Electro together make static. I mentioned earlier I live in a state that has rain. I also live in a state where the winters are dry as all heck. There's static electricity everywhere. The second my husband touches anything metal in our house, he gets shocked because that's how the world works. The way I see it for this reaction, now this one's a bit of a stretch, but it still makes enough sense that if you were to sit somebody in front of Genshin and say, this is how this works, they'd be like, oh yeah, I can understand that. Magnets. Not only do magnets come from the ground, they essentially are very linked with electricity. We use magnets in everyday life and they seem magical. They almost seem electrified, even though they really aren't. I'm not a science person. So the two of them together making static, something that relies on magnets, to me, makes perfect sense. Now what static, the reaction, would do, it would generate a shield on you. So this could be anywhere between like, you know, Zhongli's shield, which would be really overpowered, to something like, oh, you have more electro, you know, resistance, whatever. But this pulls enemies that are afflicted with static towards you. Magnets. They attract. I think this would be a very interesting mechanic for movement as well, because sure, we have Animo. We have Animo where it's like pushing people away, putting them in a little ball with Venti, but nothing that really ever brings them closer to you in a meaningful manner that you can take very good advantage of. I just think it's really unique. Next up is Geo and Pyro together make Magma. Come on. How is that not something that is already in the game? Think about it. Volcanoes exist. Think about, okay, if you've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know what I'm talking about. Magma bending is freaking cool. Why can't we have that in this game? Why can't we have the physical manifestation of what is inside a volcano be a reaction from Geo and Pyro? Because if you were, again, with a lot of these concepts, is you sit a person down in front of Genshin who's never played it before, they can understand that. Say, oh yeah, duh. That makes sense. Volcanoes. Essentially, what a magma would do is generating an AoE on the ground that's magma, and it deals damage over time to enemies. This would be perfect to react with, you know, Animo. Say, for example, you do a Venti ult with Pyro infused, and then you happen to throw in a, you know, Geo character, and then there's magma on the ground, and it's damaging them over time on top of the swirl, and the concept of that is beautiful to me. That is a unique way of using Geo instead of pooping crystals. And the final concept I have for you all today is a bit more complex than the previous ones. It is mud plus Animo equals erosion. So similar to the vein of how, you know, Hyper Bloom exists, Burgeon exists, this would be something that reacts with the mud reaction. And we talked about what that was earlier. Class, tell me what it is. I can listen. Yes, that is Geo and Hydro. Thank you. Thank you for answering me. I really appreciate that. So what this reaction entails, I'm going to describe what it does first, and then I'm going to get into the reasoning behind it. So it takes the mud reaction and essentially applies it on the target. It reduces the enemy's damage. Not just damage reduction for yourself. It just reduces their damage. It's a debuff. So for example, you're fighting an annoying enemy that can one-shot you if you don't dodge. You apply erosion. That one shot turns into a two shot. Of course, that would need to be balanced, you know, in terms of game. But wouldn't that be interesting, having a reaction that triggers, that debuffs the enemy so much that they can't hurt you as much? Now, the reason behind erosion is, okay, I know I just said I'm not a science person, but I do like some science, so I'm going to describe erosion for you if you don't know what erosion is. Erosion is the wearing over time of stone with wind and water. Oh, looky you! What elements are in part of this reaction? Geo, Hydro, and Animo. Wow, I never would have guessed. It makes sense that their damage is being whittled by the wind and the water and the stone. All of them reacting together in this way makes sense. Sure, we could go on and on and on and say, hey, what about, you know, magma and Animo reacting? And then you could have a swirling volcano of volcano. Wow, a swirling tornado of a volcano. You know, ultimate disaster movie. Let's talk about that. You could also say, hey, wait, I'm noticing in this list Cryo's not here. Or just a pure Animo reaction. And if you've played Genshin, you understand that not every element reacts to another. These are the reactions that came to my mind when thinking, what is the most simple but cool way I can make geo-elemental reactions? Things that would, 1, make sense thematically, 2, do more than just poop out a crystal to give you a shield, and 3, provide a unique game mechanic that no other element could provide. there's a trend with these reactions. Not only just it being based off of the ground, like I said earlier, because, you know, mud and magma, erosion, all of that stuff. It also surrounds the idea of debuffs. Sure, we have some debuffing reactions like freeze, you know, your enemy can't move, that's a pretty big debuff. But all of the Geo elements, elemental reactions that I've theorized, are all debuffs to the enemy that you are applying it to, instead of just raw damage. Because we have plenty of elemental reactions that are just raw damage. These reactions would provide a new way of playing the game. And I think that's important. Geo needs to be revitalized. It gives them an integration into the game instead of pooping crystals. It makes the element feel a part of the world again. I don't think majority of players need Crystallize anymore. The era of Crystallize is done. And just like how gems are made, it's time we put some pressure on Geo and really make it into a crystal that fits into the world of Genshin Impact. Let me know your thoughts down below about what you think the problem is with Geo. Do you think, oh, maybe Crystallize is a good reaction still that just needs a little bit of work? Or are you in the same camp as me where it needs an entire overhaul so Geo can be revitalized and we can finally get a new Geo character? Thank you guys so much for listening to my rambling, and keep fighting your battles. And I'll see you next time.